And then what this is showing is this kind of like sums it all together. So like, yes, I love marketing. I love the art and science of it all. Sorry for my dog, the perks of working from home, if you can hear her. But this is how we measure at Quantum. Because at the end of the day, I've got to be able to give credit and attribution to something. So I don't play that attribution in that single touch game, but I've got to have some type of pipeline number that we're driving towards. And my goal with this type of model here is I don't care about the single source. I don't care about the attribution. I care about, is the data in a spot where my team can be really confident in the decisions that they make? Is the data showing them enough information where like they're confident that this is the right thing to keep investing in or to divest from? Which, if you summarize that, that has nothing to do with attribution. That has
No.
everything to do with what role does this play in the journey? What is the value that it plays? And are we going to keep doing it or not? And so these are the three major items that we measure. It has a really strict kind of timeline and attribution that we run in order to get to it. But again, it's not about the attribution. It's about, do you have the right data to make really thoughtful decisions? And that's how I support my marketers.
I've never used the term marketing acceleration. Could you just make a comment on that? I'm getting that now, totally listening to your whole story, your thinking, your approach. Could you maybe share what marketing acceleration means and how you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So marketing acceleration for us is that when we come in after an opportunity has been opened. So that's where, it's not this direct pass off where it's like, hey, marketing's out of the story now.
The old baton, you take it,
Yeah,
hands
yeah.
off.
Yes, we don't do that, right? We continue to support, whether that's through really thoughtful digital experiences, bringing them to events, running any ABX type campaigns, all of that. And so acceleration measures that stage one to close one rate and how much we influence that time frame.
I'm curious, Alexi, when you present marketing's impact on the org, to your peers or to your management, do you present these three things side by side? Do you present them independently? How do you actually communicate that to those key stakeholders?
Yeah, good question. So I present all of them together. And this is actually a key thing that I even tell any of the internal marketing teams, right? I'm like, you guys are responsible for reporting out on your programs. You need to report out on all three of these things together and not isolate one, because it's important for us to communicate that we do all three, right? We impact all three. Every program impacts all three. Every program might have a strength in one versus the other, but all of them should be considered into how we influence the entire journey and the entire pipeline. And so I look at all of them. Marketing influence is presented in a percentage. So what is the percentage of the total pipeline that we're impacting and influencing? Generated is a pipeline number. So that is, with a lot of confidence, we can say that, marketing had a significant impact on the ability for us to open this stage one. And then acceleration is kind of a combination of pipeline number, and we also look at the percentage of total pipe that we influence as well. But all of those numbers are presented together.
I loved how you
Love
went
it.
from journey to funnel too. You use those terms in context to what you are actually measuring, because you do have to measure the buyer's journey. And then you have to turn that into a funnel that you can understand to put that in terms versus trying to blend those words. And I'm not trying to play with words here, but there is an art and science in that communications, isn't there?
Yep, 100%.
Okay.
I think the last slide here just shows this is how this is the upfront part of the of our journey. These are estimated, these are real-ish numbers. So I'll just be super transparent about that. These are
We're not looking for any proprietary info here.
Yeah, these are real-ish numbers. They're not too far off, I will say that. But this is one of those things, again, where just like I'm saying, you can't just look at generation, influence, and acceleration. Also looking at every stage of that funnel and how those conversion rates work. You'll see that I have a bunch of different conversion rates where I'm like, from stage, from step 2 to 3, it's this conversion rate. But when you go from step 2 to step 4, what is that conversion? Because that also tells you what is the value of these types of programs, right? I'm also very conversion rate heavy, so I will typically bias every kind of measurement on the marketing program side towards conversion rate versus volume or anything like this. But this is a great example of when I say, do my teams have enough data and confidence in the data to make the right decisions? It's typically coming from a view like this. It's show me all the funnel and show me all the conversion rates, and you start seeing opportunities for optimization and where the strengths of each program lies.
Yeah, you really get a view, and not just for reporting, but for optimization and where to take it and where to focus your priorities, your energy, maybe even your investment or resources in people based on these.
Absolutely.
Super helpful, Lexi. Thank you for that perspective and walking us through your world. All right, Max, your turn, your journey. This looks like a lot of steps, buddy.
A lot of steps. My background is in marketing operations. That's where I started out after leaving the 911 dispatcher world. We can talk about that on offline with whoever's curious and how that went. But the journey has been, thankfully, up and to the right. It's been a combination of large enterprises, very small startups along the way, consultancy with some of the most recognizable companies in technology, and I've slowly grown from what a lot of marketing ops folks would be familiar with: executing tickets, sending emails, starting to get more familiar with, okay, what is an organization actually looking for from a marketing department? Stepping back from my day-to-day responsibilities and trying to become familiar with what the goal is of this whole marketing motion. I think it's sometimes hard to pull yourself out of that, but that led me to analytics and starting to take some responsibility for marketing optimization. How do we add value? Where are we not adding value? Starting to realize that in a lot of instances, marketing is struggling to actually make a real impact on the funnel, trying to pull back and not just be, a biased advocate for marketing, but an advocate for the business. And that really helped me set an objective tone, make objective decisions founded in what the objectives of the organization are, typically, revenue, pipeline driven decisions. And that then led into making recommendations for teams that were outside of my original scope, like field marketing teams and BDR, SDR teams. And now my responsibilities have grown to the point where it's a large subset of the marketing organization, marketing operations analytics still, but an inbound BDR team, a global field marketing team. It's the largest subset of my organization at this point. And so having that operational foundation has helped me stay in tune with that objective mindset. I'm not coming in assuming that our strategy in any particular organization is the right one. I'm constantly looking for ways that my teams or our stakeholders can improve. And that's really helped me set this, lawyer-like tone, not for my team, but for the business, which appeals to, stakeholders when they see that you're not just there fighting every fight just because you spent some money and you want to prove that it was the right thing to do. So I think that journey's really led me to that point. And it's really helped keep me grounded and in tune with the nuts and bolts of how things work without micromanaging, hopefully, I think my team would say. So if we go ahead and move to the next slide here.
I just love that you started with stress management. It's probably talk about a great foundation. You talked about ops and analytics and your background, but that stress management keeps that cool demeanor as you navigate through this and figure things out.
It keeps us real. Like are we saving the world? Some companies, maybe. I would argue that our cybersecurity technology helps keep people safe. But compared to the daily lives of folks dealing with 911 calls, it's very different. So it definitely helps keep me grounded and realistic. So, this echoes a lot of what, Alexi spoke to earlier. I like to think of attribution methodologies as lenses for investment recommendations. Depending on how a business wants to grow or wants to engage, you can choose to use one methodology or another. And similar to how Alexi formats her report out on pipeline and percent, impacted, accelerated, I like to present as many different metrics side by side as possible to help underscore that marketing adds value in many, many different ways. And I'm not partial to any of what's on the screen right now. It's just intended to show that if a company wants to focus on what generates that initial spark, then they may want to focus on single touch earlier in the buyer journey. And you can assess and say, okay, I'm trying to understand why this is how we do it. And as Alexi outlined, like, look at all these other touches that we can point to that show meaningful engagement in other areas of the funnel if you really want to push for a change to attribution, if you feel like it underrepresents the value that your team adds or the impact that it could have on the org. Last touch attribution, if someone really wants to focus, like Alexi was talking about, on that thing that generated the opportunity, that may be what an organization wants to focus on. But showing these things side by side helps underscore that if you focus just on one, you disregard these other key points in the buyer journey. And so this could end up being a page of 30 different metrics. And what we'll see on some later slides here is once you get comfortable with how your core goal is defined, and in my case, it's, in most marketing leader cases, it's a pipeline metric, it's a dollar metric that comes before all else, because marketing is an investment, hopefully not a cost center. That's a perception that we all want to try to mitigate, but we're an investment that can truly help grow or retain or accelerate in so many different ways. So I like to show my folks a menu. What ways could we measure marketing's impact, and why are we just using one? Should we use multiple? How would we like to display these things? And again, this is much more helpful for me in my experience than kicking down the door and saying, well, I've heard a lot about multi-touch and I've seen that work 1 out of 5 times. So let's go with that, because that seems like the most complicated way to approach it. So, I think
smartest person in the room
being realistic about how much work it takes, can help point one direction or another. But I like to provide a menu and help explain how these measure different. They provide different insights and can lead to very different investment strategies for marketing.
I'm curious with that one,
sorry, guys.
Is when you're talking with your internal teams, right? And you're trying to get them to align on this, who's in the room with, who are your most important stakeholders that need to understand these models, and who you're reporting out to you, and how do you approach those different people?
Great question. I think that the 2 teams that I am looking at most often, who I'm staring at across the table, are sales teams and finance teams. Sales is typically on marketing side in a lot of cases. Sales understands, maybe live events, they're not showing up very well in a sourced approach, but they show up really well in a last touch approach or something like that. But if the business chooses to measure source, sales is typically on the marketing team side. Hey, we want to run this thing. It had an impact. It's just not being measured. And it's often alignment with finance teams who are less tuned in to the day-to-day operations or customer conversations, but have to be stewards for investment for the organization. If you're public, for your public investors, who have to make sure that the work that's being done in marketing and sales teams does correlate to the definition of success of the business. And that's what we touched on earlier, in that marketing is not the team that gets to define what success means. We can influence how the business defines marketing success, but at the end of the day, we get budget to invest in programs and people, and that has to result in some sort of value. And what that value is typically defined ultimately by a finance team. And so that's just as critical a relationship as your sales team relationship.
Yeah, there's got to be a BFF relationship that's earned and built through trust, through co-creation in many ways, making them, sitting down with them and doing the work with them, or someone from the team, so that it feels like it's co-created versus something we've thrown over the wall or across the table, keeping with your analogy is sitting across the table.
Yeah, the most successful attribution discussion that I've ever had was when sales operations, marketing, and finance, go-to-market operations were all on the same page from the get-go. And, because if you get aligned with sales and then finance decides that that's not going to work, you could spend months going around on a model that doesn't actually end up, meeting the needs of the business from someone's perspective. So, at any rate, sorry, Scott, I jumped in there again.
No, gosh, come on. This is just valuable. And these are some of your guiding principles that you have, that you think through and think about, almost your playbook in a sense of make sure you think this way. What do you mean by tap into the community for ideas and refinement? What does that mean?